Okay, so Black Mesa is a love letter to, I guess, one of the most influential video games of all time. It's a fan-made Half-Life remake. It took 40 volunteers 8 years to make using Valve's Source engine, and the result, I think, has been well worth waiting for. I really want to play this game because I'm a huge fan of the original Half-Life, and I think this could just be the ticket to unlocking all those old feelings of nostalgia. So basically, this is just like playing Valve's version, only with updated visuals, a smarter AI, bigger maps, and a whole new soundtrack. I don't think all of these updates are on the money, judging by what I've seen so far, but overall, I think it promises to be an impressive and totally kick-ass reimagining. There's some dialogue thrown in here and there. Not all of the voice acting is on the mark, but it's not enough to distract you from the revamped visuals, which, thanks to the Source engine, makes everything look a whole lot awesome, like brighter, cleaner, and generally more exciting. The structure of the levels has also been tweaked with some environments, including more puzzles, and there are bigger spaces here and there. Basically, all the Half-Life weapons and enemies are also intact, which is really cool. That said, it's not the whole game, so Black Mesa is about 8 to 9 hours of gameplay, but the development team say they're working on the next chapter. And best of all, it's free, so go get 'em, Gordon.
I completely missed the boat on Telltale's The Walking Dead, but it definitely deserves attention as one of 2012's better games. As an adventure game fan, I was intrigued when I first heard of it, but somehow all the episodes seemed to pass me by as I struggled with the decision of whether to start my Walking Dead experience with the comics, the game, or the TV show. Tackling awkward camera angles can be difficult, and the non-traditional adventure gameplay style can be off-putting, but it suits the story and the atmosphere of the game. Despite my general dislike of quick-time events in adventure games, the tension and suspense of The Walking Dead couldn't properly be conveyed without them. Timed dialogue interactions and button mashing keep the urgency of the story heightened, while typical adventure game mechanics would see this subside. The most jarringly brilliant single thing about the game, though, is the writing. The relationships and struggles between the NPCs are emotionally evocative and compelling. The zombie-riddled world only serves as the platform for choice-driven interaction and an enthralling narrative. You'll be forced to make split-second decisions, and for some reason I found myself preferring to write out my self-made consequences than simply replay the episode. It's refreshing to see that, for once, a zombie apocalyptic game doesn't begin and end with the undead brainless antagonists.
Puzzle platformer Quantum Conundrum shares some recognizable similarities with well-loved Valve title Portal. In Quantum Conundrum, you take on the role of a silent protagonist who happens to have a genius scientist for an uncle. You're sent to your uncle's house only to find that one of his crazy experiments has gone wrong, conveniently trapping him in another dimension with a spout of amnesia. Of course, it's up to you to rescue him. This would all be very simple if it weren't for a mansion filled with death traps in the way. Much like Portal, the main focus of the game revolves around solving physics-based puzzles. Players have access to 4 different dimensions and can apply them to rooms and objects inside them to change their physical properties. For example, using the fluffy dimension makes all objects in the room much lighter than normal, letting you lift them up. There is also a heavy dimension, a slow dimension, and a reverse gravity dimension. Gameplay revolves around switching between dimensions, as only one can be active at a time. When switching, objects still retain their existing position and velocity. The game also throws in some platform jumping challenges to mix it up. Between the action-packed and competitive worlds of gaming, Quantum Conundrum provides a nice break, which may be why I haven't had a chance to clock the game quite yet. The game looks polished enough to please, and messing with physics is fun. And who doesn't enjoy the feeling of successfully solving a puzzle? If you enjoyed Portal, the delightfully responsive world of Quantum Conundrum is sure to please.
So in the last couple of years, there's been a growing trend of difficult games, but it's not just difficult, it's an old school, you'll probably have to restart this game multiple times difficulty. And a lot of great games will be born from that, but there was one release earlier this year which a lot of people seem to have skipped over, and one which I haven't put nearly enough time into, and it's called Legend of Grimrock. Legend of Grimrock is an early 90s style first-person grid-based dungeon-crawling role-playing game designed in the spirit of games sort of like Dungeon Master and Ultima Underworld, made by 4 guys in Finland. It pulls almost no punches in bringing back that particular kind of game, which means it's really difficult, but it's so satisfying to work through. You basically create and control 4 characters who are chained together, and you have to fight and solve environmental puzzles to work your way to the bottom of the dungeon of Mount Grimrock. The classes, races, and abilities can all be tailored down to fine detail, and the character positioning, with 2 characters needing to be behind the other 2, plays a big part in how you approach the terrifying battles. The game's environmental puzzling element is also surprisingly great. They start off easy enough, but they just get super intricate a few hours in. The majority of them are optional, so you could probably skip them if you wanted to, but the promise of like really great loot and weapons to help you survive and the brutal combat is almost a must. With a level editor and also available, and the idea of user-made dungeons, Legend of Grimrock is definitely a game I want to go back and give a lot of time to. It's available on PC through the dev themselves, Steam or GOG, for no more than $15. And I think it's definitely one of the sleeper hits of 2012.
Games are fun. They're entertainment and escapism. They give ordinary people the chance to do incredible things like protect the world from the destruction at the hands of alien forces, drive exotic cars you could only ever hope to own, or hear the roar of a crowd asking for one more song, when in reality that guitar you bought in high school to impress the ladies sits in your bedroom gathering dust. But while so many games focus on giving us a shot at the fame, power, or glory we may never see ourselves in real life, sometimes they also give us the chance to approach and experience unfamiliar and at times difficult issues and themes. Enter Papo Yo, a downloadable game exclusive to the PlayStation 3 and one I've been eager to play since first hearing about it. I admire developers who take challenging subject matter and use it as inspiration. Whether it's in confronting or a palatable format, it's important the stories at the center of games have a chance to be more than something simple to propel the action forward. This game puts you in the role of Kiko, a young South American boy who deals with home hardships by escaping into a world of imagination. His friend, a huge horned beast named Monster, is friendly and helpful, eating lemons and letting Kiko bounce off his huge pink stomach to reach high platforms. But Monster has a dark side, and when he eats frogs, which he loves, he goes into a murderous rage, chasing and hurting the boy. While the game is only several hours long and is made up of simple puzzling and platforming, the story and emotions at its core are very real and honest, and it's a refreshing break from the shooters that get all the attention. Papo Yo is available on the PlayStation Network now.
So at the time of its release, Spec Ops The Line didn't garner a whole bunch of critical acclaim. So reviews were good, but not really enough to set tongues wagging, which is why I kind of looked past it. It was praised for its interesting take on war shooters, but was called out for stiff mechanics, banal gunplay, and things like that. It wasn't really until a few weeks later that the game's real motivations became clear, and it really got me thinking about going back to play it. So the thing with Spec Ops The Line is that it looks and sounds like a military shooter, but it aims much higher than that. It doesn't just want players to question the nature of war, it wants us to question the nature of war games. So things like, why do we enjoy virtual killing so much that we dedicate hours, days, weeks to it? What is it about military shooters that unlocks this part of our personality? So playing a few hours of Spec Ops, these things start to really become evident, but I really think you have to stick through the whole game to see the big picture. So the shooting is monotonous, sure, sometimes a little bit even ridiculous, the killing is incentivized, and the dialogue, at least at first, is too polished to sound convincing, but as you make your way through the game, you realize that all of these things, like the game is aware of its shortcomings, it uses them to force players towards the realization that sometimes it's necessary to question our likes and desires and ask ourselves what they say about us as human beings. So if you're up for some deep and meaningful self-inquiry, and let's face it, who isn't around Christmas time, do yourself a favor and pick up Spec Ops The Line.
Plenty of indie games flew under the radar this year, a notable one of which was Thomas Was Alone. Thomas Was Alone caught my attention for its limbo-esque gameplay and abstract storytelling. When I saw that a quirky narrator was also in the mix, the side-scroller was instantly added to my to-play pile. Unfortunately, it was kind of overshadowed by new glossy releases like Diablo 3 and Torchlight 2, and I forgot about it. The game was independently developed by Mike Bithell, and we gave it a well-deserved 7.5. The characters are assorted polygons with names and personas. If it's a straight platform experience you want, then the levels are varied, albeit a little simple in places. If it's the story you're drawn to, then you can enjoy the quirky narration and uncover the personalities, vulnerabilities, strengths and weaknesses of all the characters, all of which are paralleled by their in-game appearance and abilities. The simple side-scroller with its mechanic of transferring polygons into portals reveals a story of love, loneliness, companionship and abandonment. Thomas Was Alone needs a mention because it's a quality game that a lot of people missed in the big AAA release period. If you like your side-scrollers with a heavy dose of story and atmosphere a la Limbo or Braid, then this game should be right for you.
With so many FPS games on the market these days, you could be forgiven for skipping over the one game that takes it back to when the multiplayer revolution began. Counter-Strike has a long history in the FPS genre, from its beginnings as a mod for Valve's Half-Life to its release as an individual game built on the Source engine. This latest game, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, takes the tried and true formula that made the original so popular and gives it a modern makeover. Whilst the option for solo play is available via AI-controlled bots, the heart of the game really lies in its online multiplayer. Players can choose to side with a team of terrorists or counter-terrorists and buy weapons with money earned in a variety of ways that range from killing enemy players to rescuing hostages. As well as updated graphics, new maps and modes have been added to breathe a fresh experience into gameplay. Matchmaking also gives players a chance to play according to their skill level, with classic casual and classic competitive modes available. At its heart, CSGO is a skill-based shooter. It emphasises the importance of working with your team and is incredibly rewarding when mastered. At a higher level, there exists a strategical depth to the game. Constant patching from Valve also means a balanced experience, which makes it no surprise that Counter-Strike is a well-established esports title. Unfortunately, the game was only released digitally via Steam and not available in retail, and may have been missed as a result. It may be easy to dismiss Go for its attachment to the original Counter-Strike, but its updated visuals, mechanic tweaks, and accessibility to new and old players alike make for a polished and rewarding experience. And at $15 on Steam, this game is a bargain.
Science fiction. If it's taught us anything, it's that things don't always pan out quite the way we expect them to. Cybernetic implants, time travel, pill form food, hoverboards, still all things of myth at this stage, I'm afraid. But if you want a glimpse at where we might be heading, then you owe it to yourself to take a look at the scary, awesome future of Binary Domain. The premise for the game centers around robots rebuilding a fresh world after global warming floods the Earth. The new Geneva Convention bans the development of humanoid machines, and in 2080, one of these so-called hollow children commits suicide in the lobby of one of the major players in the robot arms race, completely unaware it's a machine. With all the other third-person shooters on the market, we wouldn't be surprised if this game passed you by earlier this year. So, what makes it worth your time? Binary Domain makes shooting robots a real pleasure. Their metal skins splinter and strip away before your eyes as you pelt them with bullets, blow off their legs and they'll crawl to complete their directive. Land a clean shot and knock off their heads, and they'll even attack their fellow automatons, doing some of the dirty work for you. Along the way, you're joined by a ragtag crew of UN soldiers, each with their own unique personalities and weapon loadouts. You'll do all the heavy lifting, but these characters give the game some flavour, and there's a dialogue and command system you can control with your voice. Best of all, while the game was fairly universally praised, it wasn't what you'd call a runaway commercial success. And while that's bad news for developer Sega, it's great for gamers. You should be able to find this one in the bargain bin for under $20, and it's well worth it. Frankly, if you don't like shooting robots, we can't be friends anymore.
So 2012 has been a really great year for indie games. You've got like Hotline Miami, FTL, The Walking Dead. Pretty much all my favorite games this year have been from independent developers. But there is a game that I've been following for almost a decade now that finally came out this year, which I'm really annoyed I haven't been able to set aside more time for. And that game is Retro City Rampage. So Retro City Rampage started off as an 8-bit Grand Theft Auto 3 remake, but through development began to incorporate characters and locations from other 8-bit games, and eventually evolved into what it is now. So it's a top-down open world action-adventure in the style of the original Grand Theft Auto games. It crams a lot of modern-day mechanics like cover into this retro world, but often just completely transitions into a different genre, parodying games like Metal Gear Solid, Legend of Zelda, Contra, and many more, too many to mention. But from what I've played so far, the game mechanics themselves are still solid. The open world carnage is, a blast with the retro aesthetic, especially if you love playing the first two GTA games. And the genre missions, while some of them are better than others, they give a nice flavour of variety and are a decent bus ride length if you like playing it on the go. Personally, the feat of its development and the overall aesthetic and presentation is just something that grabbed my interest immediately. And I'm really looking forward to clearing up some space in my now playing list so I can actually devote some more time to it.
One of my picks for underrated games of 2012 is Deponia. I first encountered Deponia in Paris of all places. A local French gaming show had the adventure game featured as an upcoming one to watch, and though I couldn't understand a word of it, the visuals alone had me hooked. I've been meaning to get into the game ever since, but I haven't really found the time to commit to an adventure game. The German developers Daedalic Entertainment are responsible for the Monkey Island-esque adventure game that revolves around anti-hero Rufus. For adventure game fans who miss the days of point and click, item combining, and puzzle solving, this game is a perfect choice, and it's well deserving of our 8.0 score. The meta moments where Rufus talks about how he loves to break the fourth wall, or his back talk during the tutorial, definitely help the overall charm of the game. Most of the game is named Goal, which is obviously a thinly veiled reference to the ultimate endgame achievement of any traditional narrative, particularly those found in point and click adventures. Deponia is worth your time if you've been hanging out for a classic point-and-click adventure game, given that these days they're few and far between. The characters are intriguing, though not always likable, and the themes of love, adventure, and belonging are far more touching than they are cliché. Deponia is well worth a play, even if it's a little overdue. It's a cheap buy, and if the ending isn't quite to your liking, then the sequel, Chaos on Deponia, is already out on the market.
Riddle me this, dear viewers. When is a game not a game? That's a rhetorical question. Please don't yell at your computer or mobile device. They don't deserve your misdirected anger. So, when does an interactive experience become a game, and can one exist without the other? Dun dun dun! Dear Esther is an interesting but odd beast. What started as a user-made mod for Half-Life 2 back in 2008, this year became a fully fledged standalone game. Well, sort of. You play the part of a lone character stranded on an island. The objective is to explore. There's no enemies to do combat with, no puzzles to complete, and as you roam and discover, you'll be accompanied by narration. The drip feed dialogue encourages you to reflect on whether or not you're telling the story or uncovering someone else's past as you journey around. The only constant is a blinking radio tower looming in the distance to keep you moving. Backtracking and following dead-end paths turn up clues that reveal more about this place, and while you can whip through and see everything in an hour or so, taking your time and even replaying the game multiple times over will reward patient players with more juicy tidbits. This is definitely going to be a love or hate experience, depending on your level of patience and interest in investigation. But for a mere $10 on Steam and even less in the holiday sales, it's great value. Me, I'm an explorer and a collector, so I've been keeping this ace up my sleeves for the Christmas break with the goal of giving this the time it deserves. Sure, you don't shoot bad guys in the face or jump a burning school bus full of orphans with a jet ski, like in some of those more action-oriented games, but that doesn't mean it's not an interesting experiment in what else games could be in the future.